Welcome, dear traveller, to a quiet corner of the world where time moves like honey down the side of a clay jar. Slowly, sweetly, and without hurry, settle yourself somewhere warm. Let the weight of your day soften like wax beneath a gentle flame. There is nothing here you must do, nothing you must remember, nothing you must hold. Only listen and let the listening carry you. Tonight, we travel together to a city that once breathed beneath the long shadow of a sleeping mountain. A city of terracotta rooftops and whispering fountains where the air carried the scent of warm bread, crushed olives, and the faint salt of a distant sea. A city called Pompeii long before the silence came. Imagine, if you will, a narrow road of pale stone polished smooth by centuries of sandaled feet. The evening is unhurried. The sky above wears the soft colours of a bruised peach, and the swallows trace lazy spirals in the cooling air. Somewhere a clay bell hums against a doorway, stirred by a breeze too gentle to name. Close your eyes, or let them rest half open, like a cat dozing in a sunbeam. Breathe in slowly and breathe out slower still. With each soft exhalation the centuries unwind, one quiet thread at a time. We are stepping gently through a door that has waited very patiently for you. Beyond it lies a world that has been sleeping, and tonight you will be welcomed into it as a quiet friend. Before our footsteps cross fully into that distant evening, allow me to offer you one small invitation, soft as a candle being lit in a side chapel. If the warmth of this voice feels like a place you might wish to return to, a quiet harbour in the long sea of your week, then consider gently the small ritual of subscribing. There is no rush, no urgency, no demand. Only the soft tap of a finger, the easy press of a button, and a tiny silver bell that will whisper to you when another sleepy story is ready to wander your way. Think of it as leaving a lamp burning in a window, a signal that you wish to be welcomed back, a way of telling this little corner of the night that you would like to hear more. More crumbling temples, more candlelit kitchens, more forgotten gardens dreaming under olive trees. Each new tale will be poured slowly like wine into a clay cup, and offered to you without hurry. If you feel inclined to tap that gentle button, the tale will not pause for it. We will continue together, walking softly through the dust of centuries, breathing the warm air of a vanished afternoon. And if you do not, that is also welcome here. Your gentle presence alone is already enough. For now, stay. Settle deeper into your blankets, your cushions, your quiet. The road ahead is long, tanned lined with lavender, and patient as the moon itself. The road that leads us into Pompeii is paved with great slabs of grey volcanic stone, each one cut and laid by hands that worked beneath suns long since set. These stones are not flat in the modern sense, not smooth like a polished floor, but rounded gently at the edges, worn into soft hollows by the patient, endless passage of cartwheels and sandaled feet. Walk slowly along them now in the failing light of a summer evening, and feel how each stone holds the warmth of the day, releasing it back into the air like a hearth that has been quietly tending itself since dawn. On either side of this road rise the walls of the city, built of small irregular bricks and rough volcanic tuff, plastered over and painted in colours that the light of evening makes even softer. There is a particular shade of red here, a deep drowsy red the colour of pomegranate juice mixed with cinnamon that the Pompeians love above all others. They paint it across the lower walls of their homes, around the doorframes, along the bases of their columns, and as the sun sinks low this red seems to glow from within, as though the walls themselves were warm to the touch. Above the red, the plaster pales into a creamy yellow, the colour of fresh butter, and above that, where the walls meet the wooden eaves of the rooftops, the white of crushed seashells catches the last gold of the disappearing sun. Notice how the city is shaped. Its streets are narrow and crooked, never quite straight, always turning a little, as though following the wandering thoughts of someone walking home in no particular hurry. Where the main roads cross, great stepping stones rise from the cobbles, set there so that pedestrians may pass dry-footed when the cleansing waters wash through the streets in the early morning. Between these stepping stones the wheels of carts have worn deep grooves into the pavement, smooth channels polished by years of grain wagons rumbling in from the countryside, of olive carts creaking down from the slopes of the mountain, of wine barrels rolling in from the vineyards beyond the walls. The air carries many gentle layers tonight. There is the warm, yeasty scent of bread cooling on windowsills where the bakers have set the last loaves of the day to rest. There is the soft greenness of crushed herbs, basil, rosemary, the wild thyme that grows between the paving stones, released as feet brush against them. There is the deeper, older perfume of sun-warmed stone, that earthy fragrance that rises from any place where rock has spent the day drinking light. And, under all of this faint but unmistakable, runs the salt thread of the sea drifting up from the bay below the city, where the fishing boats are coming home with their lanterns just beginning to glow. Lift your gaze now gently to the rooftops. They are all of clay tile, the curved kind that overlap like the scales of a sleeping fish baked to a soft terracotta orange that the long evening has dipped into rose. Smoke rises from many of these roofs, but it is the polite smoke of household fires being damped down for the night. Thin, pale ribbons that climb a little way into the sky and then dissolve into the dusk. Doves walk along the ridges of the tiles with the careful, measured steps of small philosophers, pausing now and then to tip their heads at the changing colours of the air. Beyond the rooftops, on the northern horizon, the great mountain sleeps. The Pompeians do not call it Vesuvius with the sharpness we might use today. They speak its name softly, almost fondly, the way one might name a familiar elder who lives at the edge of the family. Its slopes are green with vineyards that climb in tidy terraces with chestnut groves and wild oak, and in this evening light the mountain wears a robe of lavender shadow tipped with the last copper of the sun. No one fears it, no one watches it with worry. It has been quiet for so long that it is simply the shape of home, the line against which all other lines are measured. The grandmothers of Pompeii were born looking at it, and their grandmothers before them. Walk a little further, and the road opens into a small square. A fountain stands at its centre, carved from grey stone in the simple, sturdy shape of a basin with a spout shaped like the head of a goat. Water runs from the goat's mouth in a thin silver thread, falling into the basin with a sound so soft and continuous that you stop noticing it almost at once, the way you stop noticing the breath in your own chest. A woman is here filling a tall clay jar called an amphora, balancing it carefully on her hip, and her thin linen dress is gathered at the shoulder with a small bronze pin shaped like a dragonfly. She smiles at no one in particular, the absent, pleased smile of someone who has finished her work for the day, and she walks away into the deepening shadows with the slow, even step of a person who knows every turn of every street between here and her own threshold. The shops along the square are closing now. Their owners are pulling down the wooden shutters, sliding the long iron bars into place with the quiet metallic clicks that signal the end of the working day all over the city. Potter is wiping clay from his hands with a damp rag, leaving silvery streaks across his apron. A wool dyer whose fingers will be blue for the rest of his life from the indigo he has stirred all afternoon is pouring the day's last vat into smaller jars for tomorrow. Baker counts the small bronze coins she has earned and slides them into a leather pouch worn smooth with use, then ties the pouch to her belt with a knot her mother taught her when she was 8 years old. The light changes now. The peach has faded into apricot, the apricot into lavender, the lavender into the first hint of indigo that promises stars. Lamps begin to appear in the high windows, oil lamps with small bronze spouts, each one no brighter than a held breath, and yet together they make the whole city seem to glow gently from within, like a paper lantern. The temperature drops by the smallest measure, a cool breath from the sea slipping in through the gates, and somewhere in the distance a flute begins to play, a simple looping melody, more remembered than composed, drifting from a doorway you cannot quite locate. Stand here for a moment longer. Breathe. Let the city settle around you the way a cat settles into a lap, with small adjustments and a long, slow sigh. We are not in a hurry to enter any one house yet. We are not in a hurry to climb any particular stair. We are only here to feel the shape of the evening, the slow rhythm of a city folding itself towards sleep, the quiet way that twilight in Pompeii does not arrive so much as it is welcomed, like an old friend who has come to sit by the fire and say nothing at all. Let us choose gently a single doorway from the many that line our street, and let us step through it now into the inner world of a Pompeian house. The door itself is a thing worth pausing over, for it has stories pressed into its grain. It is made of cypress wood, dark and oily and resistant to insects, with great iron studs hammered along its edges in a pattern that is both decorative and protective. The wood has weathered to the colour of old tea, and the studs have rusted to a soft brown that catches the lamplight like the eyes of a sleepy fox. A small bronze knocker hangs in the centre of the door, shaped like a dolphin curling around a ring, and the dolphin's nose has been worn smooth and shiny by generations of hands that have lifted and let it fall. The door opens inward with a sigh, a long low creak from the bronze hinges that sounds almost like the house itself drawing breath. We step over a worn stone threshold inscribed with two simple words, Salve, the Pompeian welcome, the letters set in tiny black and white tiles arranged like a small mosaic carpet beneath the feet. Children have run across this greeting for generations, and their soft sandals have rounded the corners of the letters into something gentler than they began. Now we are inside the forces, the narrow entrance corridor, and here the world becomes hushed at once. The walls of the corridor are painted in that same pomegranate red we saw outside, but here in the cool dimness the red deepens to the colour of mulled wine. Slender black bands run along the top and bottom of the walls, edged with delicate yellow lines no thicker than a thread, and between these bands float small painted figures, a dancer with one foot lifted, a flute player with cheeks softly rounded, a slim crane wading through painted reeds. The figures are no taller than your hand, and they appear to be dreaming rather than dancing, their movements slowed by the centuries they have been holding their poses. The corridor opens then into the atrium, the heart of the house, and here you must stop and simply breathe. The atrium is a great rectangular room with a high ceiling, and that ceiling is open to the sky in its very centre, a square opening called the compluvium, framed by tiles arranged in rows like sleeping fish. Directly below this opening set into the marble floor is a shallow rectangular pool called the impluvium, designed to catch the rain that falls through the ceiling on stormy days. Tonight the pool holds only the still water of yesterday's small shower, and the surface of that water is so calm, so untroubled, that it has become a perfect mirror of the indigo evening sky above. Look down into it and you will see the first star reflected there, trembling only slightly when a moth crosses the opening overhead. The marble of the atrium floor is veined with the softest grey, threaded through with creamy white and the occasional pale gold flicker, polished by years of footsteps until it gleams like the surface of a frozen pond. Around the impluvium, 4 slender columns rise, each one fluted and capped with a simple capital carved in the Doric style. No flourishes, no ornament, only the quiet dignity of a well-proportioned line. The columns are painted at their bases with that same warm red, but as the eye travels upward they fade into ivory, and at their tops they catch the last copper of evening light slipping through the open ceiling. Around the edges of the atrium, set into the walls in shallow alcoves, are the lares, the small bronze figures of the household gods. They are not stern, they are not grand. They are little dancers in flowing tunics, each one holding a small drinking horn, frozen mid-step in a perpetual celebration of the family who lives here. Beside them sits a tiny altar, no larger than a dinner plate, where each morning someone, perhaps the mother of the house, perhaps the eldest daughter, lights a small flame and lays a few grains of salt and a sprig of laurel as a quiet thank you to the spirits of the household. Tonight the flame burns low and orange, and the laurel from this morning has darkened to a deep tobacco brown, sending up a thin curl of fragrance that smells of forest mornings and old libraries. Beyond the atrium, the house unfolds into deeper rooms. Through an opening on the far side we glimpse the tablinum, the master's study, where wooden shelves hold rolled scrolls bound in red ribbons, and a low table sits ready with a wax tablet and a slender bronze stylus. Past the tablinum, framed by elegant columns, lies the peristyle, the inner garden, where the heart of the household truly beats. We will walk there in time. For now, let your eye return to the atrium, to the soft slap of evening air against the marble, to the tiny ripples that the breeze stirs across the impluvium pool. Look upward once more slowly at the great wooden beams that cross the ceiling. They are massive timbers of cedar, brought down from the mountains many years ago, each beam thicker than a man's thigh, darkened by smoke and time to the colour of strong coffee. The grain of the wood is still visible, swirling and knotted in places, smooth and straight in others, and from the beams hang two simple iron lamps shaped like small hanging boats, each holding a wick that floats in olive oil. Tonight the lamps are not yet lit, the family has not yet fully gathered for the evening, but you can imagine, can you not, the way the soft yellow flames will soon flicker to life, casting long warm shadows across the painted walls and turning the atrium into a chamber of honey-coloured light. The walls of the atrium themselves deserve their own slow study. They are not painted in single flat colours but in carefully designed panels, each one framed by slender painted columns that mimic, in 2 dimensions, the real architecture of grand villas elsewhere in the empire. Within the panels, painted scenes appear, a small landscape with a temple on a distant hill, a still life of pomegranates and figs spilling from a wicker basket, a single peacock perched on a painted balustrade with its long tail trailing into the room below. The colours are mineral colours, ground from earth and stone, ochre, cinnabar, lapis, malachite, and they have a depth and richness that no modern paint quite captures. They do not shout, they glow. The floor at the edges of the atrium gives way in places to small mosaic decorations, a band of black and white wave patterns running along the threshold. A tiny image of a little black dog set into the floor near the entrance, with the words "Cave Canem, beware of the dog," lettered beneath it in a tone so playful that you understand at once it is a joke. The real dog, somewhere in the back of the house, is almost certainly soft, slow, and snoring. This is the architecture of welcome, of stillness, of slow breathing. The Pompeian house is not built to impress so much as to embrace, to gather its inhabitants into a series of nested calmnesses, each room quieter and more inward than the last, until at the centre one finds the open sky, the still pool, and the small flame of the household gods burning patiently. It has burned for as long as anyone in this family can remember. Step now through the slender opening that leads beyond the tablinum, past the rustle of unrolled scrolls and the faint resin scent of cedar shelves, and let yourself enter the most beloved room of any Pompeian home. This is the peristyle, the inner garden, and though it is called a room, it has no roof at all. It is a square of open sky enclosed by a graceful colonnade, a private piece of the heavens that the family has gently invited indoors. Stand at the threshold and let the garden welcome you slowly. The first thing you will notice is the change in the air itself. The atrium air carried the faint smoke of the household lamps and the cool stone breath of marble. Here the air has been gently steeped all afternoon in the green perfume of growing things. There is the bright tang of crushed mint where a foot has brushed too close to the herb beds. There is the soft sweetness of late-blooming jasmine opening its small white stars now that the heat of the day has eased. There is the deep, drowsy fragrance of rosemary baked all afternoon by the sun, the kind of scent that seems to settle directly into the hollows of the lungs and stay there. And underneath all of it, threaded through the others like a low note in a chord, is the cool, damp smell of moss growing in the shaded corners where the colonnade meets the soil. The colonnade itself is a thing of slow elegance. 12 slender columns, 3 to each side, rise from a low-painted wall that runs around the inner edge of the garden. The columns are stuccoed in white that has yellowed gently with age, the way old ivory does, and their bases are painted in that beloved Pompeian red, fading upward into cream. Between the columns, the painted wall is decorated with scenes of birds and fruit and small fluttering figures, but here in the open air the colours are softer, more weathered, more dreamlike. Small painted nightingale on the western wall has been bleached almost to silver by years of afternoon sun, and yet she still sings, in her own painted way, to the real nightingales who answer her from the trees beyond the rooftops. The garden floor is laid out in a precise yet gentle pattern. A path of pale crushed stone runs around the edges, encircling 4 small flower beds bordered by low boxwood hedges, and at the very centre of this arrangement stands a small fountain. The fountain is no taller than a child, carved from a soft grey marble that has weathered into a moss-flecked silver, and water rises from a single small spout in its centre, falling back into a shallow bowl with a sound so quiet, so continuous, that it has become almost the breath of the garden itself. The water leaves the bowl through a small bronze drain shaped like a leaf, and from there it travels through a narrow channel that runs invisibly beneath the path, watering the roots of the plants in their beds before disappearing again into the earth. The flower beds are a soft conspiracy of colour and scent. Here low cushions of violets press against the boxwood, their tiny faces turned toward the fading light. There, a tall stand of pale pink hollyhocks rises against the white column, each blossom a small pleated cup catching the last of the day's warmth. Row of myrtle bushes, dense and dark green, holds the corner where the garden meets the kitchen wall, and from their branches dangle the small white flowers the Pompeians weave into wedding crowns. There are roses too, of course, old roses, not the bright modern blooms of distant centuries, but smaller, wilder cousins, with petals of a deep dusty pink and a fragrance that is almost edible, almost like the perfume of warm honey poured over crushed apples. Look more closely at the soil between the plants. It is the dark, rich soil of a region nourished for centuries by the slow generosity of the mountain, mixed with handfuls of fine ash that the gardener has stirred in to keep the earth loose and welcoming to roots. Here and there small terracotta jars have been buried up to their necks in the soil, their open mouths level with the ground. These are ollae perforatae, the watering pots perforated with small holes around their lower halves, and when they are filled in the morning their water seeps out slowly all day long, watering the deep roots of the plants without ever flooding the surface. It is an old gardener's trick, gentle and patient, and tonight all 4 jars are quiet, their work done, their clay cool to the touch. In the southern corner of the garden, half shaded by the colonnade, stands a single fig tree. It is not a young tree. Its trunk is twisted into the slow muscular shapes that figs make when they have lived long, with bark like grey suede and pale green leaves the size of a child's open hand. From its branches hang the small pendulous shapes of the season's figs. Still some weeks from ripening, their skins are pale green flushed with the first hint of purple. Small wooden bench has been set beneath this tree, polished by years of someone, perhaps the grandmother of this house, sitting there with a piece of mending in her lap, listening to the bees that visit the garden in the long warm afternoons. The bees are quieter now, in the gathering dusk, but a few late workers still drift between the lavender stalks, their wings catching the last gold of the sky. Above them, a pair of swallows arc into the open square of air, dipping low across the garden and rising again so swiftly that the eye almost misses them. They are nesting somewhere in the eaves, and they have made dozens, perhaps hundreds, of these graceful crossings today. Now their flight is slowing, growing softer, the long curves of their wings carrying them home for the night. Near the fountain, set into the earth almost flush with the path, lies a small mosaic. It is round, no wider than the spread of 2 hands, and it shows the figure of a sleeping dog curled around its own tail. The mosaic is made of tiles no larger than fingernails, in shades of cream and amber and the deep brown of old wood and the dog's eye. A single black tile is closed in perfect contentment. The Pompeians liked their gardens to remind them gently of the value of rest. Take a slow breath. Let the air of the peristyle fill your chest, green, cool, lightly perfumed, faintly damp. Let your shoulders soften. Listen to the whisper of the fountain, the small clicking of an evening cricket beginning to tune his song from somewhere inside the rosemary, the rustle of leaves as a small breeze visits and then departs. The garden is ready for the night. The flowers are folding slowly into themselves. The tendrils of the climbing jasmine are settling against the column they have spent the day caressing. The nightingale carved on the wall is being joined now by the first hesitant notes of her real cousin, somewhere out beyond the rooftops, calling the city softly toward sleep. We have not yet visited the kitchen or the bedchambers or the bath. We are simply here, in this small green sanctuary, breathing the slow breath of the garden, letting the day continue its quiet retreat into the past. Let us return now from the green hush of the garden into the deeper rooms of the house. and let us linger slowly and patiently before the painted walls. To walk past them in haste as a stranger might would be to miss the long, quiet conversation that the Pompeians have been having with their walls for generations. These rooms speak in colour and in image, and to read them is to listen to the soft voice of a household telling itself stories about who it is, who it has been, and who it dreams of becoming. The first room we enter is the triclinium, the dining room, where the family takes its slow evening meals reclining on cushioned couches arranged around three sides of a low table. The walls of this room are painted in panels, each one tall and slender, framed by slim painted columns that imitate the architecture of grand temples elsewhere in the empire. The lower portion of the wall is the deep, velvety black of a moonless sky, and against this darkness the painted figures seem to float, lit from within by some unseen lamp. In the central panel of the eastern wall, a scene unfolds with the slow grace of a remembered dream. Young woman sits upon a low stone bench, her dress the pale blue-green of seawater near a sandy shore, her hair gathered into a soft knot at the nape of her neck and held in place with a single ivory comb. In her hands she holds a small lyre, its frame carved from polished tortoiseshell, its strings so thinly painted they are barely more than suggestions of light. She is not playing the instrument, she is listening to it, the way one listens to a thought that has not yet quite formed. Beside her, half hidden among the painted flowers, a small grey hare has paused with one paw lifted, its long ears tilted toward her silent music. Move closer to this panel and look at the brushwork. The Pompeian painters did not labour over every detail. They worked with quick, confident strokes, building the figure with broad washes of colour and then returning, only at the last, to lay in the small touches that make her live. A single thin line of cream paint suggests the curve of her cheek. 3 short dabs of darker green become the folds of her dress where it gathers behind her knee. A whisper of yellow, no bigger than a grain of barley, lights the edge of the lyre where an imagined sun catches it. The whole panel, when seen from the doorway, has a softness almost like a memory, as though one were not so much looking at a wall as remembering a song heard long ago in a courtyard one can no longer locate. The borders that frame each panel deserve their own attention. They are made of slender painted ribbons twisting in long endless coils, and at the corners they bloom into small painted medallions no larger than the palm of a hand. Inside each medallion lives a tiny figure here, a winged child holding a basket of pomegranates. There a small dancer balancing on one toe upon a flower stem. In another a tortoise crowned with ivy, walking with grave dignity across an imaginary meadow. These tiny medallion figures are the secret pleasure of the painters who placed them where only the slow eye could find them, knowing that those who took the time to look would smile in private recognition. The ceiling of the triclinium is painted as well, though more simply. The plaster has been washed in the soft blue of a midsummer afternoon, and across that blue, in a pattern of perfect repetition, are scattered small painted stars, each one no larger than a fingertip. The stars are not yellow, but a pale cream tinged with the faintest pink, and looking up at them in the lamplight gives the strange sweet sensation of dining beneath an evening sky that has paused generously in its own settling. In the very centre of the ceiling, where the 4 lines of the room would meet if drawn diagonally, hovers a single painted bird in flight, a small swallow, wings outstretched, painted as though she were forever passing overhead, never arriving. In the next room, smaller and quieter, the walls take a different mood. This is the cubiculum, the bedchamber, and the painters here have used softer colours, gentler scenes designed to ease the inhabitants towards sleep. The walls are not red, but a pale apricot, the colour of the inside of a seashell warmed by the sun, and against this background appear scenes of distant landscapes, long meandering rivers, low rolling hills, crowned with tiny temples, slim shepherds leading slim sheep along painted paths that curve toward the horizon. Each scene is no larger than an open book, and there are many of them scattered across the walls like windows into other countrysides, other afternoons, other lives the family might wander through in dreams. One of these tiny landscapes is particularly lovely. It shows a small wooden bridge crossing a slow-painted river, and on the bridge stands a single fisherman with his rod bowed gently toward the water. The river is rendered in 3 slow horizontal lines of palest blue, the bridge in 3 small dabs of brown, and the fisherman is no larger than a thumbnail. Yet the painter has somehow caught in those few strokes the entire stillness of a long, unhurried morning. It is the kind of image that a sleepy eye returns to, again and again as the lamp burns low. In the corner of this bedchamber, painted directly onto the plaster as though emerging from the wall itself, is a small painted niche containing a vase. The vase is rendered with such careful attention that for a moment the eye is fooled. Surely there is a real shelf there, surely a real vase. Only when the hand reaches out and meets only smooth plaster does the painted illusion gently dissolve. From the painted vase rise 3 painted poppies, and behind them a painted butterfly hovers, its wings the soft purple of a clouded twilight. The Pompeians delighted in such small deceptions, these tender visual jokes meant not to mislead but to reward the lingering eye, the patient gaze. Above the bed itself, in a panel of its own, the painters have placed a scene meant to soothe whoever lays their head below. It shows a quiet harbour at evening with a single sailing ship at anchor, its sails furled, its lanterns just beginning to glow in the violet dusk. Tiny figures move along the painted dock, carrying baskets and amphorae, but they move with such slowness, such lack of urgency, that the entire scene seems to be holding its breath in a posture of arrival, of being finally home. The painted water of the harbour has been stippled with 1,000 tiny strokes of pale gold, suggesting the way evening light scatters across a calm sea. To lie beneath this scene, with the lamp guttering low, and the sound of the fountain drifting in from the garden, is to drift towards sleep upon a painted tide. These walls are not decoration only. They are the inner sky of the house, the long quiet companions of waking and sleeping, of meals taken and conversations murmured. The Pompeians have lived among them so long that the painted figures have become almost a second family, presiding silently over every birthday, every illness, every small private joy. And tonight, as the household settles toward its evening rest, the figures gather into the deepening shadows, their painted breaths slowing in unison with the breath of those who love them. Let us slip out gently from the warm interior of the house and follow a narrow side street toward the great open square at the heart of the city. The streets in this quarter are quieter now, the shop shutters mostly drawn, and the sound of our own soft footsteps mingles with the distant half-remembered notes of that flute we heard earlier, which is still playing somewhere out beyond the lanes of the bakers and dyers. The flagstones underfoot have cooled by only the smallest measure, still releasing the day's warmth into the soles of our sandals, still humming with the long, slow story of every foot that has ever pressed upon them. The street widens and widens again, and then opens entirely into the Forum, the great civic heart of Pompeii. The first sensation is one of breath. The city, which has been pressing close around us in narrow lanes and shadowed alleys, suddenly steps back and gives the sky its full embrace. Look upward and you will see, framed by the long colonnades of the Forum's edges, an enormous square of evening sky, deepening from apricot to lavender to the first true indigo of night. Against this sky, the silhouette of Vesuvius rises in the distance with the calm authority of an old guardian, its slopes already darkened to deep blue, its summit catching only the last rose gold of a sun that has slipped below the western horizon. The Forum is paved with great rectangular slabs of travertine, a creamy stone the colour of old ivory, polished by centuries of sandals and bare feet to a soft sheen. Walk slowly across it now and feel how it differs from the volcanic stone of the side streets. It is gentler underfoot, slightly cooler, slightly smoother, with a fine grain that catches the lamplight in tiny scattered flecks. The slabs are laid in a careful pattern, each one fitted to its neighbours with such precision that the seams between them are no thicker than a strand of hair, and yet here and there a thin line of moss has crept up between the stones, the patient signature of wet winters past. On every side of the great square, the buildings of public life rise in their dignified rhythms. To the north stands the Temple of Jupiter, lifted upon a high stone podium and reached by a long ceremonial staircase. Its 6 tall columns of pale marble rise into the deepening sky, and between them, half hidden in the shadow of the temple porch, stands the great statue of the god himself, seated, robed, holding a slim staff in one hand, his marble face softened by years of gentle weather to an expression that seems less stern than thoughtful. The temple's pediment is carved with the figures of an old story, gods and goddesses arranged in their stately groupings, but in this fading light their faces are no longer fully readable. They have become silhouettes only, the suggestion of an old conversation that the city has been overhearing for so long it no longer needs to listen. To the eastern side of the forum stretches the Macellum, the great covered market, where during the day the city's merchants sell fish from the bay, fruit from the slopes, cheeses from the inland farms, and the small clay pots of garum, the prized fish sauce that the Pompeians pour with great enthusiasm over nearly everything. Now the market is closed, its stalls empty, but the long colonnade that fronts it still smells faintly of salt and citrus, of crushed bay leaves and the cool stone of fishmongers' counters that have been scrubbed down at the close of business. A single grey cat walks slowly along the inside of the colonnade, pausing now and then to sniff at the base of a column where a particularly interesting fish was wrapped that morning, and then continuing on with the unhurried dignity of a creature who knows that all the doors of the city will eventually open in time for him. Across from the market on the western side runs the long, elegant facade of the Basilica, the great hall of justice and commerce. Its tall columns are fluted and capped with capitals carved into the curling acanthus leaf pattern that the Pompeians find so satisfying, and behind the columns stretches a long rectangular hall, now empty, where during the day the lawyers and magistrates conduct their slow, grave business. Few oil lamps have been lit inside, hung from bronze chains, and through the colonnade their soft yellow glow seems to move slightly with each gentle breath of evening air. The basilica's stone floor, glimpsed through the columns, is patterned in great geometric panels of black and white, and even from this distance the eye can sense the careful symmetry of the design, the way each square answers the next in a slow dance of light and shadow. The southern end of the forum is bounded by the 3 smaller civic buildings, the offices of the Duumviri, the magistrates who administer the city, and beside them the small chamber where the city council gathers. These buildings are humble in scale but rich in detail. Their doorways framed with carved stone mouldings, their walls painted in the warm Pompeian red that has by now become so familiar to us that we hardly need to name it. Above the doorway of one stands a small bronze plaque inscribed with the names of the magistrates currently serving the city, and the letters of the inscription have been carefully chiselled and then filled with copper that has weathered to a lovely soft green, like the patina on the back of a long-loved bell. In the very centre of the forum, raised upon a low stone platform, stand the bases of several honorary statues. Some of the statues themselves have been removed for cleaning, leaving only their inscribed pedestals. Others still stand, robed figures of past benefactors of the city, their marble cheeks worn smooth, their sculpted hands extended in gestures of permanent goodwill. The bases bear long inscriptions in clean square Roman letters recording the gifts each honoured citizen made to the city: a fountain repaired, a temple decorated, a public banquet provided in a year of good harvest. The Pompeians are a people who love to remember kindness, who keep careful written record of generosity, and these stone witnesses to past generosities are part of the slow communal memory of the place. Few citizens still cross the forum at this late hour. An old man walks with a long staff, his white tunic gathered at the waist with a simple cord, his pace so slow that he seems almost to be moving through the square the way a cloud moves across a calm sky. A pair of young women carry empty baskets upon their hips, returning from a final errand to the market. Their voices low and confidential, their laughter soft. Small boy chases his hoop along the southern colonnade, the wooden circle clicking gently against the paving stones, and his shadow stretches long and thin behind him in the dying light. Stand here in the middle of this great quiet square, and let the scale of it settle into your bones. This is a city that has built itself a heart of open sky, a place to gather, to remember, to argue gently, to celebrate, to mourn. The The forum is not yet asleep, but it is leaning that way, leaning into the long blue evening, breathing in the slow, even rhythm of a place that has done its work for the day and is now permitting itself at last to rest. Let us slip backward, gently, through the soft fabric of time, and step into the same house we visited at twilight, but at a very different hour. It is now the hour just before dawn, that pale grey moment when the world has not yet decided whether it is still night or already morning. The atrium is hushed, the impluvium pool reflects only a sky of pearl and ash, and the painted figures on the walls have receded into the grey, patient and dim, waiting for the first lamp to wake them. The whole house breathes slowly, deeply, the way a sleeping body breathes, and to walk through its rooms now is to move through a long, quiet exhalation that has lasted all night long. The first to rise is the atriensis, the trusted servant who tends to the threshold of the household. He is an older man with hair the colour of wood smoke and eyes the gentle brown of polished walnut, and he has performed this morning ritual so many thousands of times that his hands move now without conscious thought. He carries with him a small bronze lamp, its wick trimmed the night before, its little reservoir filled with fresh olive oil that smells faintly of summer fields and crushed leaves. He lights this lamp from a small flame kept burning all night in the kitchen hearth, and then he carries the lamp slowly through the house, touching its small flame to each of the household lamps in turn, the lamp in the atrium, the lamp by the lares shrine, the lamps that hang above the dining couches, the small lamp set into the niche at the corner of the master's study. Each new flame, as it catches, releases a tiny, soft sound, a gentle waft of awakening, and a thin curl of fragrance, the warm vegetable sweetness of olive oil burning, mingled with the faint nutty smell of the wick that has been twisted from a strand of flax. As the lamps multiply, the rooms begin slowly to glow with a low honey-coloured light. The painted figures on the walls re-emerge from their grey slumber, their colours deepening, their gestures resuming. The little dancer with her flute, the crane wading through painted reeds, the tiny medallion tortoise crowned with ivy, all of them are gently reawakened by the touch of the lamps. In the kitchen, which lies behind the peristyle in a small smoke-darkened room, the cook has already been at work for some time. She is a stout, calm woman with sleeves rolled to her elbows and a streak of flour across one cheekbone, and her morning begins, as it has for 30 years, with the tending of the hearth fire. She kneels before the low square hearth, banked the night before with a careful mound of warm ash, and with a long iron poker she gently rakes back the ash to expose the small red embers still glowing beneath. Onto these embers she lays slender shavings of dry pine, which catch at once with a soft crackle, and onto the kindling she places, with practised patience, a careful pyramid of small dry sticks, then larger ones. The fire wakes slowly, its first thin flames pale yellow, then deepening to the warm orange that will keep the kitchen alive throughout the day. Above the hearth, suspended on iron hooks, hang the bronze pots and pans of the household, small ones for warming oil, larger ones for soups and porridges, a great round one used only on feast days for the long slow stews of pork and lentils. The bronze of these vessels has darkened over the years to a deep tobacco brown, but their inner surfaces are kept polished bright by the cook's careful hand, and they glow softly in the new firelight like small earthbound moons. On a low wooden table beside the hearth stand the supplies for the morning's first task, a tall clay jar of milled wheat flour, a smaller jar of barley flour, a small terracotta jug of olive oil, a pinch pot of salt the colour of seafoam, and a deep wooden bowl in which the cook will mix the dough for the household's morning bread. She works without haste, scooping flour into the bowl with a small wooden cup, drizzling oil from the jug in a thin, slow stream, adding a careful pinch of salt, and finally pouring in the warm water that has been waiting in a small pot at the edge of the hearth. Her hands begin to knead the dough, pressing and folding with a rhythm that is almost a kind of breathing, and as she works, the kitchen fills slowly with the warm, comforting smell of fresh dough, that smell half flour and half life, that has been part of human mornings for longer than any of us can remember. In the bedchamber where we lingered earlier, the lady of the house has begun to stir. She does not rise quickly. She turns first onto her back and lies for several long moments simply looking up at the painted ceiling, where the small cream-coloured stars are now barely visible in the grey dawn light. Beside her, on a small bedside table of polished oak, sits a shallow silver bowl, and into this bowl her maid has poured, only minutes ago, fresh water from the morning's first jug. The maid has also placed beside the bowl a folded square of fine linen, soft from many washings, and a small ceramic dish containing a paste of crushed almonds and honey, used for the gentle washing of the face. The lady rises at last, slowly, and sits on the edge of her bed. Her long dark hair, loosened from its sleeping braid, falls in a soft fall down her back, and as she runs her fingers through it she releases a small private fragrance, the warm rose oil her maid massaged into her scalp the night before, mingled with the lavender that scents the linen pillows. She dips her fingertips into the silver bowl, lifts the cool water to her face, and lets it run slowly down her cheeks. She presses the linen gently against her closed eyelids, against her forehead, against the soft place at the nape of her neck. She breathes deeply, and with each breath the day takes a more solid shape around her. Across the house, in a smaller chamber near the kitchen, the family's young daughter is being gently woken by her own maid, an older woman who has cared for her since she was a baby. The maid does not call the child's name. She simply opens the wooden shutters of the small window, allowing the first true grey-blue of dawn to enter the room, and then she sits on the edge of the bed and rests one warm hand on the child's shoulder. The child stirs, sighs, opens one eye and then the other, and smiles a small sleepy smile. She is perhaps 8 years old, with hair the colour of dark honey and eyes still soft with sleep, and she stretches in the slow, luxurious way that only children at the beginning of a long, unhurried day know how to stretch. In the atrium, the master of the house has already begun his own morning ritual at the Lares shrine. He stands before the small bronze figures of the household gods, his head slightly bowed, his hands folded in front of him. He lifts a small pinch of salt from a tiny wooden box and lays it on the altar. He places a fresh sprig of laurel beside the salt. He whispers a few words too soft for any other ear, words that have been spoken in this house, on these stones, before this small flame, by his father and his grandfather and his great-grandfather before him. The flame on the altar catches the laurel and releases a thin curl of fragrant smoke, and the day at last has formally begun. By the middle of the morning, when the sun has climbed high enough to lay long warm fingers across the courtyards but has not yet ripened into the full heat of midday, many of the citizens of Pompeii will begin their slow wandering toward the public baths. To the modern ear, the word bath suggests a hurried act, a brief plunge into water, a quick washing away of the world. But for the Pompeians, the bath is something else entirely. It is a temple of the body, a slow ceremony of warmth and water and conversation that may last the better part of an afternoon, and it is one of the gentlest pleasures the city offers. Let us follow our master of the house, the same man who whispered before the Lares this morning, as he walks the few short streets between his home and the Forum baths. He carries with him a small bundle wrapped in soft linen, a fresh tunic for after the bath, a folded square of rougher cloth for drying, a small flask of perfumed oil, and a pair of slim curved bronze instruments called strigils, used to scrape the oil and the day's fatigue from the skin. He walks unhurriedly, nodding to acquaintances he passes, pausing once to admire a stand of late spring flowers being arranged in a doorway, allowing the morning to deepen around him without rushing it. The entrance to the baths is announced by a simple stone archway carved with the gentle figures of dolphins curling around tridents, and beyond this arch lies the apodyterium, the changing room where the bathers undress and store their belongings in small numbered niches set high along the walls. These niches are not deep, but each one is carved with the patience of a stonemason who knows that this small recess will hold someone's folded clothes 1,000 times in its long life. The walls of the apodyterium are painted in panels of pale blue and creamy white, with small painted figures of bathers, a woman drying her hair, a young man wrapped in a towel, slave bringing in a tray of small clay perfume bottles, set into the wall as gentle visual companions to the real bathers below. The floor here is laid with a fine mosaic, and the mosaic depicts the sea. Tiny blue and green tiles, no larger than fingernails, are arranged in long curving patterns that suggest the slow swelling of waves, and through these waves swim small mosaic fish, a striped grey mullet, a silver sardine, an octopus with curling tentacles, a single seahorse no larger than a thumb. The bathers walk barefoot across these waves, and the cool tiles beneath their feet seem to whisper that they are entering a different element, leaving the dust of the streets behind and stepping slowly into the long quiet sea of the bath. From the apoditerium, the path leads first into the tepidarium, the warm room. Here the temperature shifts gently, not sharply, but as a long, slow breath of warmer air, as though one had walked from a cool morning into a sun-warmed room facing south. The tepidarium is lit by a single high window, and through this window a thick column of pale gold light falls onto the marble floor, where it lies in a long, warm rectangle that the bathers cross slowly, pausing within its glow as cats pause in sunbeams. The walls here are decorated with small carved niches, each holding a delicate bronze lamp, and from the high-vaulted ceiling hang chains supporting larger lamps that sway, almost imperceptibly, in the warm currents of air. Bathers linger in the tepidarium for as long as they wish, speaking to one another in low voices, allowing their bodies to warm gradually, allowing the city's small tensions to begin loosening from their shoulders. Young man reclines on a stone bench, his eyes half closed, listening to two older citizens debate, with great mildness, the merits of a particular vintage from the slopes of Vesuvius. The philosopher with a beard, the soft white of cotton grass, is reading from a small scroll, his lips moving silently around the words, occasionally pausing to smile at a particularly pleasing turn of phrase. The air smells faintly of warm marble, of perfumed oils, of the wood smoke that travels up through the hidden chambers beneath the floor. For the floor itself is gently warm. It rests upon a clever system of small brick pillars called suspensura, and beneath these pillars a furnace tended by slaves circulates hot air through a hidden underchamber, warming the floor and the lower walls of the bathing rooms. To stand in the tepidarium in bare feet is to feel the warmth rising softly from below, a kind of gentle reminder from the earth itself that one is welcome here, that one is being held. From the tepidarium, the next room is the caldarium, the hot room where the warmth deepens further into something almost liquid. The walls here are lined with marble panels veined with grey and gold, and the air is heavy with steam that drifts in slow, lazy columns toward the high, curved ceiling. At one end of the caldarium stands a great rectangular pool sunk into the floor, filled with water heated to the temperature of a kind hand, and at the other end stands a circular basin of pale marble called the labrum, where bathers may splash cool water onto their faces before returning to the heat. Steps lead down into the great hot pool, worn by countless feet to a soft curved smoothness, and a low marble bench runs along the inside of the pool, allowing the bathers to sit submerged to the shoulders while they speak with one another, in voices made gentler by the steam. The light in the caldarium comes from windows of thick translucent glass set high in the walls, and through these windows the morning sun arrives, diffused, scattered, transformed into a soft luminous mist that fills the room like a held breath. Conversations here are slow. Sentences trail off and resume. Sometimes a bather simply closes his eyes and listens to the slow drip of water from the labrum, the soft splash of a hand stirring the pool, the muffled distant voices of other bathers in other rooms. After the caldarium our master rises, water sluicing softly from his shoulders, and walks through the rooms in reverse, back through the tepidarium, where his body cools in slow degrees, and finally into the frigidarium, the cold room, where a small plunge pool of cool water awaits. He steps into it briefly, gasps lightly at the gentle shock, then steps out and is at once enveloped in a soft linen towel by an attentive slave. He walks back to the apoditerium with his skin pleasantly tingling, his body somehow lighter than when he arrived, as though he had set down a load he had not realized he was carrying. In the apoditerium, the slave anoints him with the perfumed oil, a fragrance of rose petals steeped in olive oil with a whisper of myrrh, and uses the curved strigil to scrape away the oil and any remaining dust of the morning. The strigil makes a soft sound against the skin, a gentle rasping like the sound of a small wave drawing back across smooth sand. When this is done, the master dresses in his fresh tunic, the linen cool and slightly fragrant against his warmed skin, and steps out into the late morning light, where the world meets him softer than before, kinder, slower, lit by the long quiet ceremony of water and warmth he has just completed. Let us turn our slow steps now toward the great market of the city, the Macellum, whose long colonnade we glimpsed earlier in the silvered hush of evening. By morning the same colonnade wears an entirely different face. The shutters have been rolled back upon their iron hinges. The awnings of striped linen have been unfurled and tied to bronze hooks in the columns, and the long stone counters that lay empty in the dusk are now laden with the slow patient abundance of the surrounding countryside. To walk through the Macellum at this hour is to wander through a kind of edible poem written in scents and colours and the soft music of voices haggling in the gentle Pompeian dialect. The first stall we pass belongs to a fruit seller whose face is the colour of well-tanned leather and whose hands are stained faintly with the juice of 1,000 peaches. Before him, arranged with the careful artistry that only those who love their wares can manage, lies the morning's harvest. Round terracotta dishes hold cherries the colour of polished garnet, their stems still leafed with small green hearts. Wide flat baskets are heaped with figs whose purple skins have split here and there to reveal the soft pink jewel flesh within. Tall wicker trays display apricots ripened to the orange of a sunset cloud, and beside them in smaller dishes lie the season's first pomegranates, their hard ruby skins catching the morning light like burnished metal. The fruit seller has placed a small clay bowl of water at the corner of his stall, and into this water he occasionally dips a soft cloth, which he uses to gently wipe the bloom of dust from his most prized peaches as he sets them in their place. Beside the fruit stall stands the herb seller, whose entire counter seems to have been transformed into a small green meadow. Bundles of fresh basil tied at the stems with thin strips of palm fibre lean against bundles of mint, of dill, of the wild fennel that grows along the slopes of the mountain. Small clay jars hold dried herbs from earlier seasons, oregano, marjoram, the precious saffron threads that the herb seller measures with a tiny bronze spoon and weighs upon a delicate balance whose 2 brass pans tremble at the slightest breath of air. The smell at this stall is so green, so layered, so alive, that to pause before it is to feel the entire surrounding countryside rising up into the senses at once. A small bee, having lost its way from the flower stalls further down the colonnade, drifts in slow dazzled circles above the basil, unable to choose where to land. Farther along, the fishmongers have set out the morning's catch from the bay. Their counters are slabs of cool marble, channeled with small grooves so that water may drain away into stone troughs beneath, and upon these counters lie the silver and bronze treasures of the sea, long sleek mackerels, their scales catching the light like fine chain mail, small red mullets, their fins still trembling faintly with the memory of water, heaps of glistening anchovies packed close together like a single rippling jewel, octopuses arranged in careful coils, their tentacles still soft and supple, their pale violet skins beaded with droplets of seawater. The fishmongers wear long aprons of tightly woven flax, and their hands are red from cold water and rough from years of scaling, and they greet each customer by name, asking after children and grandparents, recommending today's particular freshness, suggesting the best preparation for this fish or that. Hanging above the fishmongers' counters on a long iron rod, dangle the small bronze weights used to balance their scales, tiny dolphins, tiny crabs, tiny seahorses, each one a beautifully cast little creature, polished to a soft golden gleam by years of handling. The fishmongers' scales themselves are works of slow craftsmanship, with brass arms suspended from a central iron ring and small brass plates trembling at each end. And to watch a fishmonger weigh a single mullet is to watch a small ceremony, moment of careful attention that elevates the simple act of selling into something almost devotional. Past the fishmongers, the cheese sellers have arranged their wheels and balls of cheese on platters of fresh green leaves. Small soft balls of mozzarella, made just this morning from the milk of buffalo grazing in the marshes near the coast, swim gently in their own milky brine. Larger wheels of harder cheeses aged for months in cool cellars sit dignified and patient, their rinds the colour of pale honey, the inner cuts revealing the creamy ivory paste of the interior. The cheese seller, an old woman with cheeks the soft pink of late apples, slices a small sliver from one of her wheels and offers it on the flat of her knife to a passing customer, who takes it with a nod, tastes it slowly and breaks into a smile that requires no words. The baker's stall is announced from a distance by its scent alone. The deep, warm fragrance of fresh-baked bread reaches the senses long before the eye finds the source, and when at last we approach, we see the great round loaves stacked in pyramids on wooden trays. The Pompeian loaf is a particular thing, round, marked across its top with 8 deep cuts that divide it into 8 neat segments for easy breaking, its crust the deep gold brown of a chestnut, its inner crumb, when broken open, the soft pale ivory of a winter cloud. Beside the round loaves are smaller flatbreads studded with olives, breads woven with herbs, breads sweetened with honey for festival days, and small twisted breads shaped like little crowns for children. The baker's hands are dusted to the elbows with flour, and when he reaches up to wipe his brow he leaves a small white streak across his forehead like a brush of moonlight. At the centre of the macellum stands a circular structure called the tholos, a small round building with a domed roof supported by 12 slender columns. Within the tholos a great basin of fresh water gathers from a small fountain at its centre, and here the fishmongers and the customers wash their hands, and here the live fish are kept in cool circulating water before sale. The tholos is paved with a delicate mosaic of swimming fish, mirroring the live ones in the basin above, and the whole little structure feels like a small temple to the daily generosity of the sea. Around the perimeter of the market, low stone benches are set into the walls, and on these benches sit those Pompeians who have come not so much to shop as to be present at the slow ceremony of buying and selling. Old men recline on these benches, leaning on their walking sticks, watching their neighbours greet one another, occasionally calling out a greeting of their own. Children dart between the stalls, their small hands closing around an offered cherry or a small piece of dried fig, their laughter weaving in and out of the quieter adult voices like a thread of bright colour in a slower tapestry. The whole place breathes in a slow communal rhythm, the rhythm of a city that has been feeding itself and feeding its neighbours and feeding its memory of itself for a very long time. Let us step now from the bright open colonnades of the market into the shadowed quiet of the side streets, where the city's craftsmen labour in small workshops, half hidden behind heavy curtains of unbleached linen. These places do not announce themselves with grand signs or painted facades. They are recognized instead by their sounds, the soft tap-tap of a small bronze hammer, the slow rhythmic creak of a wooden loom, the gentle hiss of hot metal meeting cool water, and by their scents, which seep out through the doorways and mingle with the dust of the lanes in fragrances, so particular that a Pompeian child walking blindfolded through the city could name each workshop by its perfume alone. Push aside gently the linen curtain of the first doorway and step into the dim, warm world of the bronzersmith. The shop is small, perhaps the size of a single bedchamber, and its floor is packed earth swept smooth by centuries of careful sweeping. At the far wall stands the small forge, a low square structure of fire-hardened brick, and within the forge a bed of charcoal glows the deep orange red of a ripe persimmon. The bronzersmith himself sits on a low stool beside an anvil of dark iron, and on this anvil he is shaping, with slow patient strokes, a small bronze handle for an oil lamp. He is perhaps 50 years old, with shoulders strong from a lifetime of hammering, and his face is softened by the warm glow of the fire into something gentle and absorbed. He works without hurry. Each stroke of his small hammer falls precisely where he intends it, with a sound that is not loud but bright, a single clear tink that resonates briefly in the small room, and then is absorbed into the surrounding silence. Around the bronzersmith, the work of his lifetime is everywhere quietly present. Shelves along the walls hold his tools, small files of various sizes, slender chisels with handles worn to the exact shape of his fingers, tongs of various lengths, a small brass measuring rod marked with careful divisions. From iron hooks above the shelves hang the partly finished pieces of his current commissions, a graceful wine pourer in the shape of a leaping fish, a small lampstand with 3 slender legs, a delicate hinge for a jewellery box. Each piece reveals, in its half-finished state, the slow logic of its making, the patience of an art that cannot be hurried. The smell of the bronzesmith's shop is distinctive and warm. There is the dry mineral smell of the charcoal, the faint metallic tang of the bronze itself, the soft beeswax scent of the polish he uses on finished pieces, and beneath all of these the comfortable wood smoke smell that has settled into the very plaster of the walls over decades of work. The bronzesmith dips the small handle he has been shaping into a clay basin of cool water, and the water hisses softly, releasing a thin curl of steam that drifts upward and dissolves into the dim air. Then he lifts the piece out, examines it carefully in a beam of light that falls through the small high window, and sets it gently aside upon a folded cloth to cool further. Let us slip out, now, with a quiet nod of greeting, and follow the gentle creak of looms toward the next workshop along the lane. This is the weaver's house, and its scent is entirely different. The soft lanolin smell of unwashed wool, the dry mineral fragrance of the dyes drying in their stoneware jars, the faint vegetable greenness of the crushed plants from which some of the colours are made. The weaving room is larger than the bronzesmith's shop, lit by 3 small windows along its eastern wall, and in this room 3 great upright looms stand against the inner wall, each one taller than a man, their wooden frames polished to a soft brown by years of busy hands. At the central loom sits the master weaver, a woman whose hair has gone silver at the temples but whose hands move with the unhurried surety of one who has been weaving since before she could speak. She is working a length of soft wool dyed the colour of late evening sky, a deep blue-violet that the Pompeians prize for fine clothing, and her fingers pass the small wooden shuttle from one side of the warp to the other with a movement so smooth, so even, that the eye almost loses track of it. With each pass of the shuttle, she presses the new thread firmly into place with a small wooden beater, and the long, slow growth of the cloth proceeds at a pace that resembles the breathing of a sleeping animal. Around her, several younger women work at the smaller looms or at low wooden stools where they spin raw wool into thread. The spinners hold a slender wooden distaff in one hand, around which they have wound a soft puff of carded wool, and from this puff they draw out with the fingers of their other hand a thin continuous thread that they twist gently as they work. The thread descends to a small wooden spindle weighted with a stone whorl, which spins slowly as it dangles, gathering the thread upon itself in long even spirals. The spinner's hands are calm, repetitive, and their faces are softened with the slight inward focus of those who have given themselves over to a pleasant rhythm. Now and then one of them will pause to moisten her fingertips with a small bowl of water, then continue. Above the looms on long horizontal poles hang the dyed wools of the workshop, each colour drying after its bath in the dye vats. There are wools the deep red of pomegranate seeds, wools the soft yellow of weld blossoms, wools the warm brown of walnut hulls, wools the deep blue of woad leaves crushed and fermented for many slow weeks. The combination of colours hanging together makes the entire workshop seem to glow from within, as though the room itself were a slowly turning kaleidoscope of wool. In a smaller back chamber, separated from the main weaving room by another linen curtain, the dyer himself works at his great copper vats. He is a tall, thin man with arms blue to the elbows from years of working with woad, and his apron of heavy leather is stained with the layered ghosts of every colour he has ever made. The vats stand upon low brick fire pits, and the dyer is currently stirring one of them with a long wooden paddle, watching the slow pale wool he has lowered into the bath gradually deepen toward its final blue. The wool will spend many hours in this bath, then be lifted out and exposed to the air, where the most magical part of the woad dyeing happens. The wool lifted out of the vat in a pale yellow-green colour slowly transforms before the eye into the deep blue of the finished cloth. The air itself completes the chemistry that the dye has begun. To stand in this workshop, watching wool become thread, watching thread become cloth, watching cloth become the soft folded garments that will warm a Pompeian shoulder against the night air, is to witness one of the slow, honest miracles of human civilization. There is no haste here. There is no shortcut. There is only the patient hand, the patient eye, the patient attention to the small repeated motion that builds, fibre by fibre, the fabric of a life. The weaver smiles at us from her loom, nods slightly and returns her gaze to her work, and the soft thud of her beater resumes its quiet song. Let us leave the lanes of the craftsman now, with the soft thud of the weaver's beater, still echoing faintly in our ears, and let us turn our slow steps toward one of the smaller temples that nestle among the streets of Pompeii. The great temple of Jupiter at the head of the Forum is grand and imposing, fit for civic ceremonies and the solemn affairs of state. But the Pompeians possess many smaller and more intimate sanctuaries, places where a single woman with a single offering may step quietly out of the bright street and into a chamber of ancient hush. It is to one of these gentler sanctuaries that we are walking now, the temple of Isis, beloved goddess of mothers, of sailors, of those who keep faith through long, uncertain waiting. The temple is approached through a narrow door set into a high wall, and the door is framed by two small columns painted a deep Egyptian blue that has weathered over the years into the soft colour of dusk falling on a quiet sea. The threshold is worn into a shallow curve by the passage of countless devout feet, and as we step across it we pass at once from the bright glare of the morning street into a courtyard of cool shadow and slow blue-violet light. The air of the courtyard is heavy and sweet, layered with the resinous fragrance of frankincense, the warm, earthy smell of myrrh, and the faintly sharp green note of fresh laurel leaves. The courtyard itself is small but perfectly proportioned. At its centre rises the temple proper, a slender white stuccoed building lifted upon a low stone podium with four small columns supporting a triangular pediment painted with the figure of the goddess. Isis stands within the painted pediment in long blue robes, her arms outstretched in a gesture of welcome, her face serene and faintly smiling, her long dark hair gathered into the elaborate knots that the Pompeians associate with her ancient Egyptian origins. Around her are arranged the small painted symbols of her devotion, the silver crescent moon, the gentle ibis bird, the tall stem of papyrus, the soft lotus blossom opening upon still water. The walls that enclose the courtyard are painted with the same Egyptian-influenced scenes, slim-figured priestesses in long white robes carrying small bronze rattles, processions of devotees walking slowly through painted reeds, sacred boats drifting upon painted Nile waters under a painted sun, whose rays end in tiny outstretched hands. The colours of these wall paintings are softer than the bold reds of domestic interiors. Here the painters have used pale blues, soft greens, gentle ochres, and a particular warm cream that gives the entire courtyard the dreamlike quality of a half-remembered story from childhood. In the centre of the courtyard, before the podium of the temple, stands the small altar of sacrifice, a simple square of polished marble carved with garlands of flowers along its sides, no taller than a man's waist, and upon its flat top burn the slow embers of the morning's offerings. A priest moves quietly around this altar. He is dressed entirely in white, in the long pleated linen robe characteristic of the priests of Isis, and his head is shaved smooth in the Egyptian manner, polished by careful daily attention. In one hand he holds a small bronze ladle, with which he occasionally sprinkles a few grains of incense onto the embers, releasing thin curls of fragrant smoke that rise straight upward in the still air of the courtyard, before slowly dispersing toward the open sky above. The frankincense smoke is perhaps the most beloved perfume of all the temples of Pompeii. It is made from the dried tears of a small thorny tree that grows far across the sea, in lands so distant that most Pompeians have only heard of them in the stories of returning sailors. The pale golden grains arrive in the city packed in small sealed jars, and when they are dropped onto hot embers they release a fragrance of such deep, complex sweetness that it seems to belong simultaneously to forests, to deserts, to the inside of old wooden chests, and to the memory of one's grandmother's house. The smoke is pale and slow, almost reluctant to rise, drifting upward in graceful, slow spirals that the eye can follow for a long time before it disperses into the sky. Beside the altar, set into the courtyard floor, a small, shallow pool of water reflects the painted heaven above. This pool is sacred to the goddess, who in the old stories is associated with the waters of the Great Nile, and the priests of the temple keep it always full and always clean, dipping out the dust and leaves each morning with a small bronze ladle, refilling it from a covered jar that holds rainwater gathered from the temple roof. Devotees sometimes dip their fingertips into this pool and touch them to their foreheads, in a small private gesture of communion with the patient water of the goddess. A young woman has just entered the courtyard. She is perhaps in her early 20s, dressed in a simple linen tunic dyed the soft yellow of a primrose, and she carries in her hands a small bouquet of blue cornflowers and white narcissus tied at the stems with a strand of white wool. She does not approach the priest. She does not speak. She walks slowly to a small alcove set into the wall to the left of the altar, where a small bronze figure of Isis stands upon a stone shelf, and she lays her flowers gently before the figure. Then she stands, head slightly bowed, and remains there in silent prayer for a long moment. The cornflowers tremble faintly in the slow currents of incense smoke that drift past them. Her lips do not move. Whatever she is asking for or thanking the goddess for is held entirely between herself and the small bronze figure who waits in her alcove. In a smaller chamber to the side of the courtyard, two musicians sit on low wooden stools playing softly. One holds a sistrum, a small bronze rattle with thin metal rods threaded through its frame, and she shakes it gently in slow rhythmic pulses, producing a sound like the soft hiss of waves drawing back across pebbles. The other holds a small pair of aulos, the double-piped flute beloved in the temple ceremonies, and from its twin reeds she draws a slow, breathing melody that twists in and out of itself like smoke. The music is not performed for any audience in particular. It is simply the sound the temple makes when it is awake, a continuous soft offering, a sonic incense rising alongside the perfumed smoke. To stand in this courtyard for a long, quiet moment, breathing the sweet, heavy air, watching the smoke spiral upward toward the high blue square of sky, listening to the soft breath of the aulos and the gentle hiss of the sistrum, is to feel the slow accumulation of a particular kind of peace. The priests do not raise their voices, the devotees do not hurry their prayers, the flowers do not need to be more beautiful than they already are. Everything here is being done and has been done, and will continue to be done, with the unhurried care of a people who understand that sacred things require slow time, and that the goddess herself is patient and is in no hurry. Tand has all the long centuries spread out before her like a calm and willing sea. Let us return now, through the softening light of late afternoon, to the house we know so well, and let us settle into the room where the day's longest and gentlest ceremony will soon unfold. The Pompeians have a particular love for the evening meal. It is not merely a matter of nourishment, it is a slow, layered ritual that may begin in the late afternoon and stretch, with no sense of hurry whatsoever, toward the second or third hour of the night. To dine in Pompeii is to step into a small private theatre, where the actors are family and friends. The stage is the triclinium and the script is the slow unfolding of conversation, food, music, and that particular kind of laughter that arises only between people who have known one another a long time. The triclinium has been quietly prepared for some hours now. The 3 dining couches have been freshly dressed with cushions of soft wool, each one stuffed with the down of geese kept on a small farm just beyond the city walls. The cushions are covered in linen dyed the warm colour of crushed strawberries, and they have been arranged in careful pyramids upon the couches so that each diner may recline in perfect comfort, supported on the left elbow as is the long Pompeian custom. The couches themselves are wooden frames inlaid with delicate strips of bone and tortoise shells, their feet carved into the gentle paws of small lions. In the centre of the 3 couches stands the dining table, a low oblong of polished maple wood whose grain swirls in long honey-coloured rivers across its surface. Upon this table the household servants have arranged the first courses of the meal, laid out in small terracotta dishes painted on their inner surfaces, with the simple figures of fish and birds. There are slices of pale white cheese drizzled with honey from the household hives, scattered with crushed walnuts and the smallest sprinkle of crushed thyme. There are small bowls of olives, green ones from the household trees, black ones from a neighbour's grove 3 streets over, and a third bowl of olives that have been crushed gently and dressed with a thread of golden olive oil and a curl of orange peel. There are slim, tender stalks of asparagus, grown in the kitchen garden and steamed only briefly, so that their colour remains the bright spring green of new leaves. There are halved, hard-boiled quail's eggs arranged on a small platter, dusted with a powder of crushed coriander seed, their yolks the pale yellow of butter. The light in the triclinium has been carefully composed. 3 bronze lamps hang from the ceiling on slender chains, each holding 3 wicks that float in small reservoirs of olive oil, and each wick produces a small steady flame the colour of melted gold. 2 additional standing lamps have been placed near the heads of the couches, tall, slender lampstands of cast bronze, each one shaped like a slender vine climbing toward the ceiling, with small bronze leaves and tendrils curling out from the stem, and a single oil lamp blossoming at the top. The light from all these lamps mingles softly, casting on the painted walls a warm yellow glow that makes the painted figures in their black panels seem to step a little closer to the room, as though they too had been invited to the meal. The diners arrive slowly, drifting in from the various rooms of the house. The master of the family settles onto the central couch, the place of honour. His wife reclines on the couch to his right, dressed for the evening in a long, pale yellow gown gathered at the shoulders with 2 small bronze pins shaped like butterflies. Her dark hair gathered into a soft knot held in place with an ivory comb carved into the shape of a leaf. Their eldest son arrives with his young wife. They have been married only 6 months, and settles onto the third couch, and as they recline they exchange a small private smile that no one else in the room is meant to read. 2 friends of the family, an older couple from the next street, are the final guests, and they take their places with slow, easy familiarity, like people who have eaten in this room 100 times before and expect to eat here 100 times again. The first course is served by a young serving girl whose footsteps make almost no sound upon the marble floor. She moves around the table with a small bronze pitcher of warm water and a folded cloth, washing the hands of each guest in turn, a small ceremonial gesture that signals the meal has formally begun. The water is faintly perfumed with rose petals, and as it runs across each pair of hands it releases the gentlest fragrance into the warm air of the triclinium. Each guest dries their hands upon a corner of the soft white cloth she carries, and then turns with a small contented sigh to the dishes upon the table. The food is eaten with the fingers of the right hand. This is the long Pompeian custom, and the small movements of each hand, lifting a single olive, breaking a small piece of bread, dipping a stalk of asparagus into a shallow dish of fragrant oil, become themselves a kind of slow performance. There is no rush. Single small dish may occupy a guest for many minutes while they speak of other things, while they listen to a small joke from another corner of the table, while they pause to compliment the cook on the particular brightness of this olive oil, the precise sweetness of these honey-drizzled cheese slices. The second course is brought in upon a great round platter, a whole roasted fish, a sea bass perhaps, glazed with a sauce of garum and white wine, and crushed dill, garnished with thin slices of lemon and a small heap of capers. The fish has been arranged upon a bed of fresh herbs, and the platter is set down at the centre of the table with a small flourish. The master takes a small carving knife with a handle of carved bone and serves portions of the fish onto each guest's small clay plate, distributing the most prized pieces, the cheek, the tender belly, the section just behind the gills, to the guests of honour first. Between courses, conversation flows. The master speaks of the morning's visit to the bath, where he heard that the price of olive oil has risen slightly from the inland farm. His wife mentions that the herb seller in the Macellum had unusually fine basil this morning, the leaves as broad as a child's palm. The young wife, blushing faintly, tells a story about a small mishap with her loom that morning, and her husband laughs at the telling with the particular tenderness of one who is still discovering, every day, the small particularities of his beloved. The older couple tell a story they have told many times before, about a wedding they attended in their youth, and the others listen with the gentle smiles of those who love this story precisely because they have heard it many times. Wine is poured into small clay cups mixed with water in the careful Pompeian fashion, 3 parts water to 1 part wine for the early courses, the proportion shifting only slightly as the meal progresses. The wine itself is from the slopes of Vesuvius, a deep amber colour tinged with rose, fragrant of summer fruit and warm earth, and it has been kept cool in a small jar set within a larger jar packed with snow brought down from the mountain heights, and stored in the household ice cellar since winter. The cups are small and narrow, designed to be sipped slowly, and the conversation continues and the lamps burn low and the painted figures on the walls seem to lean in closer, listening. Let us drift, now from the warm laughter and gentle clinking of clay cups in the triclinium, and follow a quieter thread of the household's life, the small, patient, almost invisible ceremonies through which the Pompeians have woven their daily existence into a long conversation with the unseen presences who share their walls. To enter a Pompeian house is to enter a place where every threshold, every hearth, every doorway has its own gentle guardian, and where the daily acts of living are accompanied, almost without notice, by countless soft gestures of acknowledgement toward these patient companions. The most beloved of these unseen guardians are the Lares, whom we glimpsed earlier at their small bronze shrine in the atrium. But the Lares are not the only spirits the household tends. There are also the Penates, the spirits of the storeroom and the pantry, whose duty is to watch over the family's food stores, the jars of grain, the pots of olive oil, the strings of dried herbs hanging from the kitchen rafters. There is the genius of the master of the house himself, his guiding spirit often represented in painted form on the walls beside the Lares, dressed as a togaed figure pouring a small libation. There is the Juno of the mistress, her own protective spirit, gentler and more inward than the genius, often shown holding a small bowl of fruit or a single flower. And there are smaller spirits still, the Cardia who watches over the door hinges, the Limentinus who tends the threshold itself, the Forculus who guards the door's wooden panels. To walk through the house in the slow company of all these gentle presences is to understand that the Pompeians do not consider themselves alone in any room. The house breathes with their attention. Every door is greeted, in some small way on the way through. Every fire is honoured before it is asked to cook. Every meal is preceded by a small offering placed quietly upon the Lares altar. A few grains of salt, a sprig of fresh laurel, a single black olive, a thin slice of bread. Watch now as the master of the house, having excused himself briefly from the triclinium, performs a small ceremony that he has performed every evening of his adult life. He walks to the Lares shrine in the atrium, where the small flame burns patiently within its bronze lamp. He lifts from a tiny wooden box a single grain of incense, a small golden tear of frankincense, the colour of dried honey, and he places it onto the embers of the small altar. The grain sputters once, releases a thin curl of fragrant smoke, and dissolves slowly into a fragrance that fills the immediate area of the shrine, and then drifts in slow spirals up toward the open ceiling above. As the smoke rises, the master bows his head slightly, and his lips move in the soft murmur of a prayer that no one else can hear, a prayer of thanks for the meal his family is sharing, for the safe return of his elder son from the morning's errand, for the small goodness of having his old friends at his table tonight, for the continuing gentle care of the household layers over the day's small business. The Pompeians believe that these small gestures are not interruptions of life, but the very weave of it. To pause for a single moment in the middle of a busy day, to acknowledge the Lares, to thank the penitors, to whisper a private greeting to one's own genius, these are not separate from life. They are what give life its texture, its grain, its slow accumulation of meaning over time. House in which these small ceremonies are neglected is, to a Pompeian sensibility, a house that has begun to forget itself, a house in which the rooms have grown silent of the quiet conversations that ought to be filling them. There are larger ceremonies as well, performed at particular moments of the year. On the calends of each month, the first day, the household holds a small festival in honour of the Lares, during which fresh garlands of flowers are draped upon the shrine, and the small bronze figures themselves are gently lifted down, polished with a soft cloth dipped in beeswax and replaced upon their shelf with reverent care. On the Lemuria, the spring festival of the dead, the master rises in the deep middle of the night, walks barefoot through the silent house, and performs an old, told ceremony, casting handfuls of black beans over his shoulder while reciting words so ancient that no one quite knows what they originally meant, then washing his hands 9 times in cool water, then asking the spirits of the family's dead to depart in peace and leave the living undisturbed. The ceremony is solemn but not frightening. It is instead a tender acknowledgement of the long unbroken chain of the family, the dead and the living together, and a gentle request for harmony between the two. The household has its small relics too, objects that carry the memory of generations and are tended with particular care. In a small wooden cabinet beside the lairess' shrine, kept locked but rarely opened, lies a small leather pouch containing the pignora, the family's keepsakes. There is a tiny bronze ring that belonged to the master's grandmother, worn so thin from her long life that it would no longer fit upon any finger. There is a small clay disc inscribed with the date of the master's birth, written by his own father in careful script. There is a single dried laurel leaf, brittle now and the colour of old parchment, that was placed upon the cradle of the master's son on the day of his naming. These small objects are taken out and held only on certain occasions, at marriages, at the birth of new children, at the rare moments when an old story must be told to the youngest members of the family. Even the meals themselves are quietly threaded with small acknowledgments. Before each diner takes the first bite of bread, a small piece is broken off and dropped to the floor, intentionally an offering to the lares, a small share of the meal given to the patient watchers. The serving girl who attends the table never sweeps up these crumbs during the meal itself. They remain upon the marble floor as small visible signs of the household's gratitude. Only after the diners have departed will the crumbs be gathered and placed in a small bowl that is set briefly before the lairess' shrine before being taken outside, to be scattered for the birds, completing the slow generous cycle of giving. There is something in all of these small ceremonies that softens the household, that gentles the rhythm of its days. To live in such a house is to be reminded, again and again, that one is held within a long patient web of attention, by the lares, by the penates, by the spirits of one's ancestors, by the small painted figures on the walls, by the very stones of the threshold beneath one's feet. Nothing in the house is purely functional. Every object, every gesture, every threshold has been gently touched by meaning, has been spoken to, has been thanked, and the result is a household that hums very quietly with the slow, unbroken music of its own long tending. A music that you can almost hear if you stand very still in the atrium and let the lamps burn low and listen to the silence between the soft footsteps of those who live here. Let us step softly out of the house once more, and let us walk for a little while along the quiet streets in the slow blue hour after the evening meal, when the city is settling toward its long rest and the mind begins to drift toward thoughts more spacious than the small concerns of the day. There is something about the stones of Pompeii at this hour, the way they release their warmth so slowly, the way they have absorbed and returned the light of so many thousands of evenings just like this one, that seems to invite a particular kind of reflection. To walk among them is to feel oneself walking through layers and layers of time, each layer pressed gently into the next, none of them quite gone, all of them still murmuring beneath the soles of one's sandals. Consider for a long quiet moment the simple fact of a single paving stone. The block of dark volcanic rock beneath your feet was quarried perhaps 2 centuries before this evening, by men whose names no one remembers, whose faces no one would recognize, whose voices have long since dissolved into the larger silence. They cut this stone from a quarry in the hills. They carried it down by ox cart along a road that has itself long since been paved over. They laid it into place with mortar mixed from local lime and fine river sand, and then they walked away from it forever. The stone has remained. It has been walked upon by the great-grandparents of the people who walk upon it now, by the great-great-grandparents, by people whose languages have shifted, whose fashions have changed, whose names are written nowhere except perhaps a few crumbling tomb slabs along the road outside the city gates. And yet the stone does not seem old, it seems patient. There is a difference. Old things carry the heavy sense of having been used up. Patient things carry the lighter sense of still waiting. The paving stones of Pompeii are patient in this gentler way. They have not finished. They are still receiving footsteps. They are still cooling slowly toward the night. They are still ready to hold the warmth of tomorrow's sun and to release it again into tomorrow's evening. They have outlasted countless human generations. Not because they are stronger, but because their relationship to time is simply different, slower, larger, more forgiving. The Pompeians themselves think often about time, in their gentle, not quite philosophical way. They have inherited from their Greek teachers the long quiet habit of meditation upon the slow turning of the seasons, the rising and setting of the constellations, the grand calm rhythm of years passing into years. They have built sundials into the walls of their public courtyards, slender bronze gnomons whose shadows creep imperceptibly across stone faces marked with elegant Roman numerals, and citizens will sometimes pause for whole minutes to watch the slow movement of these shadows, as one might pause to watch the slow drift of clouds across a summer sky. There is no impatience in this watching. There is only a quiet companionship with the day's progression, a kind of unhurried witness to the way an hour shapes itself out of its own gentle becoming. In the gardens of the wealthier homes, more elaborate timepieces are sometimes found. In one peristyle not far from the house we have been visiting, a large stone sundial sits upon a carved pedestal at the corner of a flower bed. Its bronze gnomon has weathered to the soft green of seafoam, and the hours marked upon its face are inscribed not as numbers but as small carved images: a rooster for the early morning hour, a fish for the hour when fishermen return, a wine cup for the hour of the evening meal, a quiet owl for the hour of late thought. To read the time upon this sundial is to read it not merely as a measurement, but as a small invitation to a particular mood, a particular kind of attention. The morning rooster announces a hopeful awakening hour. The fish suggests the slow, patient pleasure of the homecoming meal. The wine cup speaks of conviviality, of friends gathered at low tables. The owl, late in the day, suggests the long, deep, looking inward quiet of nightfall. The Pompeians have several small phrases they use often, almost without noticing, that reveal their long meditation upon time. Tempus fugit, they say. Time flies, though when they say it gently, almost fondly, the way one might speak of a beloved old friend who is always travelling and is never quite where one expects him to be. Carpe diem, pluck the day, as one plucks a ripe fig from a low branch, a phrase borrowed from their poet Horace, who lived only a generation before, and which has taken on in Pompeii a particular flavour. Not the urgent grasping that the phrase has come to mean elsewhere, but a slow, savouring tenderness, the tenderness of one who picks the fig because the fig is ready, because the fig has waited for this very hour, because it would be unkind to leave it too long upon the branch. In the colonnades of the Forum, an old man sometimes sits upon a stone bench in the late afternoon, and to passers-by who greet him he sometimes offers a small reflection that he seems to have been carrying with him for a great many years. He says in a soft voice that he has come to believe that time is not a river, as the philosophers sometimes say, hurrying always forward, but rather a patient garden, in which everything that has ever happened still grows somewhere, in some quiet corner, waiting to be visited again by an attentive memory. The morning of his wedding, 50 years ago, is still there, he says, not gone, only further along the garden path, a little overgrown perhaps, but still flowering in its own small bed. The afternoon he held his first child for the first time is still there, blossoming patiently in its own season. The evening he sat with his father, who has been gone now for 30 years, and they shared a single cup of wine in companionable silence. That evening too is still there, a quiet plant in a quiet corner of the garden of time, watered still by his returning attention. Whether this is true in any larger philosophical sense, the old man does not claim to know. But, he says, it has helped him over the years to walk more slowly, to look more carefully, to taste each evening's wine with a kind of grateful patience, knowing that this evening too, with its particular quality of light, with its particular quiet, with the particular faces of the friends now sitting beside him, is being gently planted into the garden of the past, where it will continue to grow, in its own slow way, long after the present moment has slipped on toward the next. Listen now to the soft sound of the city around you in this blue hour, the stones beneath your feet releasing the day's warmth, the fountains still murmuring in their patient basins, the voices of households drifting through open windows, soft and indistinct, as voices always sound at the end of a long, unhurried day. All of it is being planted slowly into the patient garden. All of it is being held gently in the long attention of the city itself. And we are being held within it too, you and I, walking softly along these stones, breathing the slow blue air, listening to the quiet music of an evening that has been 1,000 years in the making. Let us turn now toward a more inward chamber of Pompeian life, the soft lamp-lit world of books and letters, where the slow patient wisdom of the city is gathered into rolled scrolls and wax tablets, and where the long human conversation with thought itself unfolds in rooms scented faintly of cedar and ink. In a city so given to slow ceremonies and unhurried meals, it should come as no surprise that the Pompeians take a particular tender pleasure in the written word, and that their finer houses include small private libraries where the master, or sometimes the mistress, retreats during the hour of the afternoon nap to read in companionable silence. The library of our familiar household is not large. It is a small chamber tucked behind the tablinum, lit by a single high window through which the soft afternoon light falls in a long slanted column of gold, illuminating a narrow path of dancing dust motes that descend slowly toward the polished floor. The walls are lined with shelves of cedar wood, simple in design, each shelf only as deep as a man's hand, and upon these shelves rest the master's collection of scrolls. They are arranged not in rigid order, but in the gentle order of a reader's affection. Favourite books on the shelves nearest the small reading couch, less visited works higher up where the dust gathers more thickly, few rare and precious scrolls kept in small wooden cases inlaid with bone and bronze. The scrolls themselves are objects of slow craft. Each one is made of papyrus, that smooth pale paper produced by patient artisans in the river valleys of Egypt, and each one is wound around a slender wooden rod called an umbilicus, the navel of the scroll. The ends of the umbilicus are often capped with small bronze knobs, and from one end dangles a small parchment label called a titulus, on which the title of the work and the name of the author have been written in careful small letters, usually in a faded reddish ink. The titles read like soft incantations in the dimness: Virgil, Homer, Ovid, Horace, Catullus, Sappho, names that the master has murmured to himself 1,000 times across his many quiet afternoons. The papyrus itself has a particular fragrance, and to enter the library is to be greeted at once by this gentle perfume. It is the dry, faintly grassy smell of long-dead reed stems pressed into pages, layered with the sharper scent of the iron-based ink used by the scribes, and warmed beneath these by the cedar resin that rises slowly from the wooden shelves in the afternoon heat. Cedar is chosen for these shelves not by accident. Its resin is gently repellent to the small bookworms that would otherwise nibble at the precious papyrus, and so the very shelves themselves are quietly tending the books they hold day and night, year after year, in their slow protective vigil. The master sits upon a low couch of polished walnut, its back curved into a gentle slope perfectly designed for an afternoon's reclining reading, and he holds the scroll he is currently reading in both hands. His left hand grasps the umbilicus on which the unread portion is still wound, his right hand the umbilicus on which he has rolled the read portion behind him, and as he reads he gently rolls the scroll from right to left, unspooling fresh text into his vision while gathering the read text into the slowly thickening roll behind. There is something deeply meditative about this physical act of reading. It cannot be hurried. The hands themselves slow the eye, requiring a small unrolling motion every few sentences, a gentle continuous accompaniment to the act of comprehension. The text upon the scroll is written in small clean letters, all in the unbroken style of the ancient world, no spaces between words, no punctuation except for the occasional small dot to mark a paragraph break, no capital letters except at certain ceremonial junctures. To read such a text is itself a small art. The eye learns over years to find the breaks between words by sense rather than by space. to feel the rhythms of the sentences in the very breath of the reader, to slow down at moments of complexity and to glide more easily through familiar passages. Reading in this fashion is less an act of consumption and more an act of slow companionship with the writer's mind, a kind of gentle dance between the patient eye and the patient page. The master is reading, this afternoon, a passage from Virgil's Georgics, the poet's long meditation upon the slow seasons of farming, of bees, of the patient cultivation of the land. He pauses every now and then upon a particular phrase, lifting his eyes from the page to gaze for a long moment at the single beam of dust-filled light falling through the high window, allowing the words to settle into him as one allows a sip of fine wine to rest upon the tongue before swallowing. Then he returns his gaze to the page, unrolls another small section, reads on. The rhythm of the reading and the rhythm of the descending dust motes seem to have synchronized themselves, both moving at the same patient pace, both belonging to the same long, quiet afternoon. A small writing table near the window set perpendicular to the light, lies the master's correspondence. Letters in Pompeii are written most often upon wax tablets, thin wooden frames filled with a smooth surface of dark beeswax, and the writing is done with a slender bronze stylus, pointed at one end for inscribing the wax and flattened at the other for smoothing out errors. To write a letter is therefore a slow physical act of pressing thought into wax, line by line, with the small soft sound of the stylus tip moving through the warm wax, leaving behind a thin pale line where the bronze has parted the surface. The master has been composing, over several afternoons, a letter to his cousin who lives in a coastal town some distance to the south. The letter speaks of small things, the unusually fine quality of this year's olives, the recent marriage of a mutual acquaintance, the small mishap of a household amphora that fell and broke last week, the deep pleasure of a recent evening spent in conversation with an old friend. The letter is not long. The Pompeians believe that letters should be brief enough to be read in a single companionable sitting, but warm enough that the reader feels the writer's affection in every line. When the letter is finished, the wax tablet will be folded shut, tied with a thin cord, and sealed with a small drop of red wax pressed with the master's signet ring, a ring whose stone is engraved with the small figure of a dolphin, his family's gentle emblem. To sit in this library, listening to the soft scrape of the stylus, the rustle of the unrolling scroll, the slow breathing of the master at his patient work, is to understand something quiet about the long human love of words. Books and letters here are not consumed. They are kept company with. They are unrolled gradually, read alongside, written into, and put back upon their shelves to wait, patient as the cedar that holds them, for the next afternoon when an unhurried hand might lift them down again and resume the gentle, century-spanning conversation that they have been holding all along. Let us now allow our thoughts to drift gently beyond the single evening we have been wandering through, and let us consider the longer rhythm of the Pompeian year, the slow turning wheel of festivals and seasons that gives the city's life its broader shape, its larger melody. For the Pompeians do not measure their year only in the small daily ceremonies we have witnessed, but in a great procession of recurring celebrations, each one carrying its own particular scent, its own particular quality of light, own particular small rituals that have been performed by mothers and grandmothers and great-grandmothers in unbroken sequence, for as long as anyone can remember. The year begins in the Pompeian reckoning in the bright, hopeful days of early spring. The festival of Anna Perenna on the Ides of March is celebrated upon the soft green slopes just outside the city walls, where the first wildflowers have begun to show their small faces among the fresh grass. Families spread blankets of woven wool upon the ground, set out wicker baskets containing simple foods, flat bread, hard cheeses, dried figs, small jars of new wine, and spend the long afternoon eating and laughing in the gentle spring sunshine. Children gather small bouquets of yellow celandine and white wood anemone, weaving them into tiny crowns that they place upon the heads of the elders, who accept these gifts with great solemn dignity and then break almost at once into laughter. The festival has no grand ceremonies, no marching processions. It is simply a long collective sigh of relief that winter has finished, that the earth has begun once more its patient green resumption of life. In the warming days that follow, the festival of Floralia fills the streets of Pompeii with garlands of fresh flowers. Doorways are draped with long ropes woven of roses and violets and small white narcissus. The fountains in the squares are decorated with floating petals, so that the water seems to flow not as water, but as a slow river of colour. Young women wear wreaths of flowers in their hair, and older women, who have not worn flowers in their hair for many years, allow their granddaughters to crown them with small posies and accept the honour with eyes that fill suddenly, surprisingly, with quiet tears. The whole city smells for several days of springtime poured into the streets, and even the most sombre of citizens find themselves smiling without quite knowing why. As the spring deepens into summer, the festival of Vestalia arrives in early June, dedicated to Vesta, the gentle goddess of the hearth. During this festival, the women of every household sweep their kitchens and hearths with particular care, gathering the fine ash and carrying it ceremonially out to the fields beyond the city, where it is scattered to bless the growing crops. The hearth fire itself is allowed, once a year on this single day, to burn very low, almost to embers, before being carefully revived from a small ceremonial flame that is lit fresh from the great public hearth in the temple of Vesta. The relighting of every household fire from this single sacred source is a quiet, beautiful ceremony, one that reminds every family of its connection to every other family, the long, invisible web of warmth that links every kitchen in the city to every other kitchen. The deep heat of midsummer brings the Neptunalia, the festival of Neptune, lord of the seas. Pompeii, set near the bay, has a particular fondness for this festival. Citizens build small shelters of green leaves and branches along the shoreline and along the banks of the small river, and in these leafy bowers they spend the hottest afternoons of the year in the cool company of running water. Children wade into the shallow tide pools and gather small periwinkles and bright pebbles. Old men cast simple lines into the calm bay and bring up small silver fish that they grill at once over little fires of driftwood. The whole festival has the quality of a long shared pause, a collective stepping into the cool element of water during the year's most demanding heat. Autumn brings the harvest festivals, and these are perhaps the most beloved of all. The Vinalia in late August celebrates the readiness of the new wine, and the streets are filled with the deep, intoxicating fragrance of crushed grapes carried in wide wooden vats from the vineyards on the slopes of Vesuvius. The whole city seems to breathe wine for several days. The grape pressers, with their tunics gathered up around their thighs and their feet stained the deep purple of crushed skins, become temporary celebrities, and children follow them through the lanes with great delight, asking to be lifted up onto the edges of the vats so that they might glimpse, for a moment, the great heaving sea of fresh grapes within. The first wine of the new pressing is poured ceremonially into small clay cups and offered to the layers of every household, and only after this offering may any human lip taste it. The Saturnalia in December is the great winter festival, the most joyfully chaotic of the Pompeian year. For 7 full days the ordinary order of life is gently inverted. Masters serve their slaves a feast, a strange, sweet, century-old custom, and slaves are permitted to speak with unusual freedom for those few days, even to gently mock their masters in good-humoured verse. Houses are decorated with small candles set in every window, with garlands of evergreen draped over every doorway, with small clay figurines of children and animals and household gods displayed on every shelf. Gifts are exchanged, small tokens mostly, a clay lamp, a wax candle, a little bundle of nuts wrapped in a square of bright cloth, a small honey cake shaped like a leaf. The streets at night during Saturnalia glow softly with the candles in every window, and the laughter of celebrating families drifts through the cool evening air like a long warm song. Each of these festivals has its scent, its sound, its quality of light. The scent of fresh wildflowers and new grass for Anna Perenna, the scent of crushed roses for Floralia, the scent of swept ash and renewed flame for Vestalia, the scent of green leaves and salt water for Neptunalia, the scent of crushed grapes and new wine for Vinalia, the scent of evergreen and beeswax candles for Saturnalia. To live a Pompeian year is to walk through a long, slow corridor of these gentle perfumes, each one giving way to the next, each one carrying with it the accumulated affection of every previous year that bore the same scent. And the children of Pompeii who grow up within this slow turning of the year learn the seasons not as abstract divisions of time, but as lived experiences carrying particular fragrances and tastes and small ceremonial gestures. They will remember all their lives the small bouquets they once wove for Anna Perenna, the way their mothers smelled of crushed roses during Floralia, the soft solemnity of relighting the kitchen fire at Vestalia, the happy chaos of a Saturnalia feast in which their father, with great mock dignity, served them an extra helping of honey cake. These memories will be planted year by year into the patient garden of their own private times, and they will continue to bloom there long after the children themselves have grown old and have grandchildren of their own and stand once more beneath the same returning festivals, smiling at their own remembered childhoods. Let us walk now, gently and without any particular destination, along the narrow lanes of Pompeii in the very last edge of evening, when the lamps are mostly lit within the houses but the sky overhead still holds the deep blue memory of the day. There is a quality to this hour, a quality that the Pompeians know well and have many small soft words for, that seems to invite the long slow thoughts about what remains, what passes, what is carried forward, and what is gently set down. To walk among the cooling stones at this hour is to feel oneself standing at the gentle hinge between what has been and what is about to be, and it is a fine hour, perhaps the finest, for thinking unhurried thoughts about the tender matter of legacy. The Pompeians, like all peoples who live within walls older than their grandparents, are quietly preoccupied with the question of what they are leaving behind. They do not phrase the question dramatically. They do not speak of monuments or of fame. They speak instead, when they speak of it at all, of small things, a recipe written carefully into a wax tablet so that a daughter may have it after her mother is gone, a particular technique for pruning the household fig tree that has been passed from grandfather to grandson for 4 generations, small bronze cup used at every wedding in the family for over a century, polished anew each time and placed in the bride's hand as the marriage vows are spoken. These are the legacies that the Pompeians cherish, small, useful, imbued with the soft warmth of accumulated touch. Walk past one particular doorway now, in a quiet lane near the eastern gate, and look at what has been carved into the stone of the threshold. It is a small inscription in the careful square letters that the Pompeian stonecutters favour, and it reads simply, Hic habitavit Quintus Maximus, qui rosus amavit. Here lived Quintus Maximus, who loved roses, that is all. No grand titles, no listing of offices held, no boast of wealth or accomplishment, only a name and a tender, almost private fact that this man who lived in this house perhaps 50 years ago loved roses, and it is enough. To pass that threshold is to remember, however briefly, this Quintus, and to feel the small warm presence of his old affection still hovering, faintly, near the carved letters of his name. The Pompeians have understood, perhaps better than most, that the loveliest legacies are not the grand ones. The grand legacies, the great public buildings, the inscribed honours in the forum, the statues upon their tall pedestals, these are admirable, but they belong in some sense to the city itself rather than to any individual heart. The truly intimate legacies are smaller. They are the small kindness remembered. They are the recipe still cooked. They are the song still hummed. They are the quiet phrase a grandfather used to say which a grandchild now finds himself saying without quite knowing why. They are the way a particular family always sets the table with the herb pot at the centre and the salt dish to the left, because that is how it has been done for as long as anyone remembers. And to do it differently would feel oddly disrespectful to the long quiet line of grandmothers nodding from beyond. The old man we met earlier in the colonnade of the Forum, the one who spoke of time as a patient garden, has thought much about this question of legacy. In one of his quiet afternoons he said, to a young man who sat down beside him on the stone bench, that he had come to believe the truest measure of a person's life was not what they had built or what they had earned, but what small softnesses they had introduced into the lives of those around them. Had they made others laugh? Had they made others feel welcome? Had they, in passing through a room, left it warmer than they found it, even by the smallest measure? These, he suggested, were the legacies that lasted, because they propagated themselves silently, person to person, like the spreading warmth of a single hearth fire shared from house to house on the night of Vestalia. There is a particular Pompeian custom that captures this gentle attitude toward legacy. When a beloved family member dies, the household does not fall into the long performative mourning that some other peoples practice. Instead, after the formal funerary observances are complete, the family quietly establishes a small new ritual within the rhythm of their daily life, a small practice that incorporates the memory of the lost one into the ongoing texture of the household. Perhaps a particular candle is lit each evening on the Lares shrine in honor of a grandmother who loved candlelight. Perhaps a small dish of honey is set out on the kitchen table on the first day of every month, in memory of an uncle who could never resist sweet things. Perhaps a small bunch of laurel is placed upon the mantelpiece on the day that would have been a brother's birthday. These small practices, gentle and unceremonious, have the effect of weaving the lost beloved into the continuing life of the family rather than setting them apart from it. The result is that the dead remain quietly present, still part of the household's slow daily breathing, still companion to its small ordinary moments. Walk a little further along this quiet lane and you will pass, set into the wall of a tomb just outside the gate, a small stone tablet bearing another inscription, a poem, or rather a single quiet verse, composed by the deceased himself before his death and inscribed by his children after he was gone. It reads, "I lived, I loved, I tended my garden, I shared my bread, the morning sun warmed me and the evening lamps welcomed me home." It was enough, it is still enough. The grammar of that final line is what the Pompeians find most beautiful. It is still enough. Present tense, continuing, ongoing, as though the dead man's contentment had not ended with his life but was still somehow breathing out into the warm evening air, still murmuring its quiet satisfaction across the years. This, perhaps, is the deepest form of legacy that the Pompeians know, the legacy of a sufficiency so complete that it does not require its own continuation. The man who has truly tended his small garden, truly loved his small household, truly enjoyed his small slow meals with friends, has nothing left to leave behind because he has not held anything back. His life has been spent at the same patient pace at which it was given to him, and when at last it concludes the way a long quiet evening concludes, softly, completely, without protest, with all its lamps gently extinguished one by one. To walk in Pompeii at the late blue hour, past doorways carved with such small modest inscriptions, is to feel oneself drawn into a long, slow company of the contented. The dead have left their small affectionate notes upon the stones, and the stones have held them, and the warm evening air has read them gently to every passing footfall, generation after generation. There is no grand drama in any of it. There is only the quiet, long persistence of small affection. The legacy that the Pompeians have understood more clearly than most is the only legacy that ever truly endures, that ever truly matters, that ever truly continues to warm the strangers who walk past centuries later than the patient blue hour of an evening that was always going to come. Let us return now slowly, very slowly, to the house we know so well, and let us follow the gentle rhythm of its preparation for the long night. The lamps are burning low. The conversation in the triclinium has softened to the murmur of friends who have spoken together long enough to be comfortable in shared silence. The painted figures on the walls have grown dim again as the wicks burn down, and they are settling in their patient way into the slow dreaming that has filled their nights for many years now. The whole house is breathing more slowly, the whole house is leaning gently towards sleep. Listen now to the soft sounds of the evening winding down. There is the gentle clink of a clay cup being set carefully upon a wooden table. There is the slow rustle of a linen napkin being folded and placed beside a finished plate. There is the small sigh of a guest stretching her arms above her head and then letting them sink slowly back to her sides. There is the quiet shuffle of a serving girl carrying a tray of empty dishes back toward the kitchen, her bare feet making almost no sound upon the marble floor. Each of these small sounds is itself a soft signal, a gentle whisper, that the evening is folding itself toward its own conclusion. Each of them seems to invite the next breath to be a little slower than the one before. The guests are taking their leave now, not with any sudden gesture, but with the slow, easy movements of those who have eaten well and laughed enough and are now ready to wander gently home. The older couple from the next street are the first to rise with small, soft sighs of pleasure, and they exchange the long, warm embraces that the Pompeians used to say goodbye, embraces that include small pats upon the back, brief touches of cheek to cheek, and the slow exchange of a few last quiet words. The younger couple, the elder son and his wife, will retire to their own small bedroom in the eastern wing of the house, and they walk there now hand in hand, their pace so slow it is almost an act of meditation. Along the way they pause briefly before the Laris shrine in the atrium. The master lays a single small leaf of laurel upon the altar, a final small thanks for the day's gentle gifts. The mistress closes her eyes for the briefest moment, breathes in the lingering fragrance of the incense smoke, and breathes out a soft, slow exhalation that seems to release the day's final small concerns into the air. The lamp upon the shrine is allowed to continue burning. It will burn all night, as it has burned all night every night for as long as anyone can remember, its small flame the patient watcher, the unblinking eye, the soft reminder that even in sleep the household is held within the long attention of its gentle guardians. In their bedchamber the mistress sits at her small dressing table while her maid, who has been waiting quietly, begins the slow nightly ritual of unbinding the mistress's hair. The maid's hands are practiced and tender. She removes first the small ivory comb, then the bronze pins, then she runs a fine wooden comb slowly through the long dark waves of hair, releasing the small fragrances of rose oil and lavender that have been gathered in it through the day. The mistress closes her eyes. She lets her head tilt slightly back. She allows herself to feel only the slow, gentle motion of the comb, the soft fragrance rising around her, the warm press of her own breath moving slowly in and out of her chest. The master, in the meantime, has begun his own simple preparations. He removes his outer tunic and lays it over the back of a wooden chair. He sits upon the edge of the bed and unties the leather thongs of his sandals, slipping them off and setting them neatly upon the floor. He pours a small amount of cool water from a clay pitcher into a shallow basin and washes his face slowly, pressing the cool water against his closed eyelids, against his cheeks, against the back of his neck. He dries his face with a soft folded square of linen and lays the cloth carefully upon the rim of the basin. The maid finishes her work. She gives a small soft good night and slips out of the room, drawing the curtain gently closed behind her. The master and mistress stand for a moment in the soft glow of the single lamp that remains lit upon the bedside table. They do not speak. They simply lean toward one another and rest their foreheads together for a long, quiet breath. Then they part, and they each draw back the soft linen covers of the bed, and they each lie down upon the cool, fresh sheets with the long, slow sigh of bodies that have been waiting all evening for precisely this small surrender. The bed itself is a thing of patient comfort. The frame is carved walnut, the mattress is stuffed with fine wool combed soft as cloud, and the sheets are of pale, unbleached linen that has been washed so many times it has grown soft as the petals of a poppy. The pillows are filled with the down of geese, scented faintly with the sprigs of dried lavender that the mistress places between them each spring. To lie down upon this bed is to be received gently and completely by every one of these accumulated softnesses, the wool, the linen, the down, the lavender, the long, warm shape of habit pressed into every fibre by the many hundreds of nights they have together held this couple in their slow rest. The lamp is reached for but not yet extinguished. It is allowed to continue burning, for now its small flame casting soft yellow light across the painted ceiling above the bed. The painted swallow at the centre of the ceiling, with her wings outstretched in their forever flight, seems to drift very slowly across an evening sky that has grown deep blue with the gathering of the night. The mistress looks up at the swallow and smiles faintly. The master beside her has already closed his eyes. His breathing has begun to slow into the long, even rhythm of approaching sleep. His hand, resting upon the cover, has gone soft and still. The mistress watches the swallow for another moment, and then her own eyes close. The lamp continues to burn. The household lares continue their patient watch. The garden fountain murmurs its quiet song through the open window. And slowly, very slowly, the whole house is folding itself into the soft, long blue silence of sleep. Now let yourself rest more deeply, dear traveller, as we walk once more through the sleeping city, slowly, softly, with no destination at all. The lamps in the high windows have burned themselves down into small, steady glows. The voices have hushed. The fountains continue their patient murmuring in the small private gardens, the same slow song they have been singing all evening, the same slow song they will continue singing all through the night. Listen to the sound of the city sleeping. It is not a silence exactly. It is something gentler than silence. It is the soft breathing of 1,000 households all exhaling at once, the slow pulse of a place that has folded itself entirely into rest. The cobbles beneath our feet are cool now, releasing the last of the day's warmth in a slow, continuous exhale of their own. The painted walls behind their closed shutters have gone quiet, their figures dreaming whatever painted figures dream when the lamps go out. The small bronze layers in their atrium shrines watch over their sleeping families with their patient, unblinking eyes, the small flames at their feet still burning low and golden. Walk slowly with me along this quiet lane. There is nothing you must remember. There is nothing you must hold. The day has been gently set down. The evening has been gently set down. The festivals and the marketplaces, the bathhouses and the libraries, the temples and the painted bedrooms, the gardens and the workshops, all of these have been gently set down like small clay lamps placed carefully upon a shelf where they will wait, patient and unhurried, until you wish to visit them again. Breathe, slowly breathe in the cool blue air of the sleeping city. Breathe out, slower still, letting the breath carry away whatever small concerns still cling to the edges of your mind. The fountain murmurs, the cobbles cool, the lamps burn low. The mountain sleeps upon the horizon, its slopes deep blue and silver with starlight. Everything is exactly as it should be. Nothing requires your attention, nothing requires your effort. You are held simply by the slow, soft breath of an evening that has been waiting for you for a very long time. The streets curve gently. There is no hurry to reach any particular place. We could walk like this for hours, slowly, softly, listening to the patient murmur of the fountains, watching the small flames in the distant windows burn lower and lower. The night air is cool but kind. It carries faint perfumes, the last memory of jasmine from a closed garden, the soft fragrance of the rosemary that grows between the paving stones, the cool mineral breath of damp stone, the distant salt thread of the sleeping sea. Listen now to the slow song of the night. There is the small chirring of a single cricket somewhere in a kitchen garden, a thread of soft repetitive sound that weaves in and out of the deeper silence. There is the very distant call of a night bird, soft and round and brief. There is the gentle whisper of leaves stirring in the small breezes that wander through the courtyards. There is the slow, continuous murmur of the fountains, never raising their voices, never falling silent, simply continuing, simply continuing, simply continuing. The cobbles beneath your feet are smooth and patient. Each one has been worn by the soft passage of countless sleepy feet, just like yours, walking just like this, in evenings just like this one, for centuries before you and centuries before them. You are not the first to walk this slow blue lane in the deepening night. You will not be the last. The stones have held them all gently, the way they are holding you now, and they will continue to hold every soft footfall that comes after, in the long patient line of sleepy travellers wandering through quiet evenings. Breathe again, slowly. The breath rises slowly, falls slowly, the chest expands gently, settles gently. There is no need to hurry the breath, there is no need to deepen it or to soften it. There is only the breath, doing what it has always done, what it has always known how to do, what it will continue to do without any instruction from you. Let the eyelids grow heavy now. Let them sink slowly, slowly, like the lamp wicks in the high windows of the sleeping houses. The world does not need your watching. The city is being watched gently by the small bronze layers and by the patient stars and by the long blue arms of the sleeping sky. You may rest, you may set down the looking, you may set down the listening, you may set down everything, simply and let yourself drift with the slow breathing of the city. The fountain still murmurs, the cobbles still cool, the cricket still churs in his kitchen garden, the small flames still burn low and golden in their bronze lamps, the mountain still sleeps upon the horizon, the painted swallow on the bedchamber ceiling still drifts forever across her painted evening sky. All of these things continue patiently, without requiring anything of you. They will continue while you sleep. They will continue when you wake. They will continue in the patient garden of time for as long as anything continues at all. Rest now. Settle deeper into your blankets, your cushions, your quiet. Let the warmth gather around you the way the warm evening air gathered around the sleeping houses of Pompeii. Let the softness hold you the way the goose-down pillows held the mistress of the house, scented faintly of lavender and old rose. Let the long, slow blue silence of the sleeping city become the long, slow blue silence of your own gentle drifting. The fountain murmurs, the cobbles cool, the lamps burn low, the mountain sleeps, the painted figures dream, the lairers watch, the cricket sings, the stars wheel slowly, slowly across the deep blue ceiling of the sky. And you, dear traveller, are slipping now gently into that same long, slow silence, that same long, slow rest, that same long, slow, patient peace that the city itself has slipped into again and again, evening after evening, for 2,000 years. There is nothing more to see tonight. There is nothing more to hear tonight. There is only the slow breath, the soft warmth, the gentle cradle of sleep opening before you like a quiet doorway. Step through it slowly, let it close behind you softly, without sound. The fountain will murmur on. The lamps will burn low, the lairess will watch. The mountain will sleep. The city will hold its long blue silence around you all night long, all night long, all night long. Sleep now. Sleep deeply. Sleep well. The patient stones have you. The patient evening has you. The slow, soft breath of Pompeii, 2,000 years old and still gently breathing. There's you. Hand will hold you until the morning comes. Welcome to Sleepy History with Henry. Here, we harness AI to breathe new life into authentic historical records, creating an immersive auditory experience. This entire production is AI-assisted, crafted solely for relaxation and sleep support. TAND is not a substitute for professional medical advice. Please do not listen while driving or operating machinery. Now, let Henry and AI guide you on a peaceful journey through the past.